I never imagined that the worst day of my life would come with such a bitter twist. My name is Ryan, and I'd always believed that hard work and dedication would be enough to build a life worth sharing. I'd been a project manager for 7 years at a mid-sized marketing firm in Chicago. I was climbing the ranks with nothing but sheer determination and a belief in the power of perseverance. Had a fiancée, Emma, who I thought was my soulmate, my partner in every sense of the word. We'd been engaged for a year, planning a beautiful spring wedding that was supposed to be the start of our forever. I remember the way she'd talk about our future, our kids. The house we'd buy in the suburbs, the dog she wanted us to rescue. Every night we'd curl up together and dream out loud. I thought we were building a life that was unbreakable. Then, out of nowhere, the bottom fell out. My company downsized. I was laid off without warning, just a box of my things and a half-hearted apology from HR. My entire identity, my sense of security, my confidence, my pride, evaporated in a single, gut-trenching afternoon. I drove home that day, hands clenched on the steering wheel, my mind reeling. I tried to tell myself it was just a setback, that I'd find another job. But deep down, a flicker of fear took hold. When I walked through the door and told Emma what had happened, I saw her face change in an instant. She tried to hide it, but her eyes flickered with doubt. She said all the right things, told me we'd get through it together. She believed in me. But there was a distance in her voice I couldn't ignore. Days turned into weeks. My job search was grueling, filled with rejection and uncertainty. I was determined to keep it all together for Emma, to prove I was still the man she agreed to marry. But one evening, after another fruitless interview, she sat me down on the couch. Her voice was trembling. She said she couldn't do it anymore, that she was scared, that she needed stability, that she couldn't be with someone who had no job, no prospects, no plan. I remember the way her words felt like knives in my chest. The wedding was off. Just like that, everything we'd built, every promise, every shared dream shattered. In an instant, she walked out the door, leaving me in the quiet of our apartment, staring at the walls we'd once painted together in that moment. I felt a wave of anger and heartbreak crash over me. My fiancée, the woman I thought would stand by me through anything, had vanished when I needed her most. I was alone. And in that silence, all I could hear was the echo of my own doubt. The days after Emma left were a blur of grief and disbelief. I would wake up in the mornings, reaching for the spot next to me in bed that was now cold and empty. My phone would light up with job alerts, but I could barely focus on them. My mind was stuck replaying that moment she walked out, the way her eyes avoided mine, the finality in her voice. I tried to stay busy. I threw myself into the job hunt with a desperation I'd never felt before. I scoured every listing, wrote countless cover letters, sent resumes into the void. I told myself if I just found a job, maybe Emma would come back. Maybe I could fix everything, but as the weeks dragged on, the emptiness of the apartment started to get to me. Everywhere I looked, there were reminders of her favorite coffee mug in the kitchen, the framed photos on the wall. It felt like she was haunting the space, a ghost of the life we'd almost had at night. I'd lie awake in bed, the ceiling fan worry above me, and wonder how everything had gone so wrong. I kept thinking back to the little moments leading up to her leaving, how she'd been distant, how she'd stopped talking about the wedding, how she'd avoided my eyes when I brought up the future. Each memory was a piece of a puzzle I couldn't quite put together. One night, unable to sleep, I picked up my phone and scrolled through Emma's social media. Her profiles had always been full of photos of us together, her captions gushing about how much she loved me. But now I noticed something different. The photos of us were gone, deleted without a trace. In their place were new pictures, carefully curated and smiling, but without me in them. My gut twisted. She'd erased me from her online life as if I'd never existed. A few days later, I ran into an old friend of Emma's at the grocery store. She looked at me with pity in her eyes, and in that moment, I felt exposed and small. She asked how I was doing, how Emma was holding up. I lied and said I was fine, that we were figuring things out. But the truth was, I hadn't heard from Emma in weeks. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how little I really knew about what she'd been thinking, Had she planned this all along? Was my layoff just an excuse to walk away from? Something she'd already decided she didn't want? Late one night, I found myself going through the old messages Emma and I had shared. I stumbled on a thread I'd never seen before, one where she was talking to a coworker I didn't recognize. The messages were short, cryptic, but there was a warmth in the way she wrote to him that set off alarm bells in my mind. She'd told me she was working late those last few weeks before the wedding was called off. But now I wondered if that was really true. The suspicion started to consume me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, smiling at someone else. I tried to push the thoughts away, telling myself I was just being paranoid, that she would never do that to me. But in the quiet of my empty apartment, those doubts grew louder. Started to pay attention to every detail, every conversation. I remembered how she'd started wearing new perfume, how she'd been texting late at night and turning her phone over when I asked who it was. All the little things that I'd brushed off as nothing suddenly seemed like pieces of a puzzle that was finally coming into focus. I couldn't prove anything, but the truth felt like it was hovering just out of reach. It was like standing on one wedge, the edge of a cliff, knowing the ground was about to give way, but not sure when. My heart pounded in my chest. My mind raced with questions. Had Emma really been in love with someone else all along? Had she ever loved me at all? I was stuck in that limbo, caught between heartbreak and suspicion. Part of me wanted to believe that Emma had just been scared, that she'd panicked when I lost my job. But another part of me, the part that was growing louder every day, was starting to believe that there was more to her sudden change of heart. Something she hadn't told me. Something that would shatter what little hope I was still clinging to. I knew I had to find out the truth, even if it broke me. Because the worst part of being betrayed isn't just the loss, it's the not knowing. And I was done living in the dark. It was a Tuesday morning when I finally got the proof I needed. I'd spent days obsessing over every detail, every half-truth. Emma had fed me. My mind was a swirl of questions, and I couldn't focus on anything else. But that morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. I was done second-guessing myself. I needed answers. I remembered that Emma still had a shared online storage account we used for wedding planning photos, budget spreadsheets, everything. I'd almost forgotten about it, but when I logged in, I found that she hadn't changed the password. My hands were shaking as I clicked through the folders, my breath catching in my throat. It felt wrong, like I was violating something sacred, but I told myself I deserved to know. At first, it was just the usual wedding plans. The playlist we'd made together, the guest list with notes in her neat handwriting. Then I found a folder I didn't recognize. It was labeled simply, personal. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the mouse. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I clicked. Inside were screenshots of conversations, messages. Between Emma and someone named Alex, my blood ran cold as I read them. They weren't just friendly chats. They were intimate, filled with inside jokes, late-night confessions, words that once belonged to us, but were now his. I can't wait to see you again. I'm so glad I have you. My name was nowhere to be found. I scrolled further, my stomach churning. She'd been seeing him for months, even before I lost my job. The pieces fell into place like a sick puzzle, her late nights at work, the sudden distance. The way she'd looked at me with eyes that were already somewhere else. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. My hands were shaking so badly I had to put the laptop down. I pressed my palms to my eyes, trying to block out the images, but they were seared into my mind. She hadn't just left me because I lost my job. She'd been building a new life behind my back while I was fighting to save ours. For a long moment, I sat there just breathing. Rage and heartbreak were swirling inside me like a storm, but underneath it all, something else was taking root. Resolve. If Emma had thought she could erase me from her life without consequence, she was wrong. I wasn't going to let her betrayal define me. I started gathering every piece of evidence I could find, saving the screenshots, backing up the messages, creating a folder of my own. I needed to be smart, to be methodical. I wasn't about to go running to Emma with half-truths and accusations. If I confronted her, I wanted to have every fact on my side. but I also knew I couldn't do this alone. I reached out to my best friend Mark, someone I trusted more than anyone. We'd been friends since college, and if there was anyone who would stand by me through this, it was him. We met up at a quiet bar on the edge of the city, the kind of place where no one asked questions. I told Mark everything about Emma, the messages, the gut-wrenching truth I'd uncovered. He listened quietly, his jaw tightening with every word. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, his eyes hard. "You can't let her get away with this, Ryan," he said. "You deserve better." Hearing those words out loud felt like a bomb. For weeks I'd been questioning my worth, wondering if I was the problem. But Mark's unwavering support reminded me that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't imagining things. Emma had betrayed me, and I had every right to feel the way I did. We spent the rest of the night talking strategy. Mark was always the practical one, calm, clear-headed, and he helped me think through my options. We talked about what I'd say if I confronted Emma, how I'd present the evidence. I wanted to be careful, to stay in control. I wouldn't let my emotions get the best of me when the time came, but underneath the planning was still the ache of what I'd lost. At night, alone in my apartment, I'd catch myself thinking about the way Emma used to laugh, the warmth of her hand in mine. Those memories would come flooding back, threatening to drown me in doubt and longing. But then I'd remember the messages, the lies, and the way she'd walked out without a second glance. And each time my resolve would harden. I started to change the way I carried myself. I stopped apologizing for the way I felt. I stopped pretending I was okay. Instead, I focused on building something new, something that didn't have her in it. I updated my resume, reached out to old colleagues, and even started working on a freelance project that had been on the back burner for years. It was like I'd been holding my breath for so long. And now, I was finally learning to breathe again. I knew that confronting Emma wouldn't be the end of the story, but it was the start of taking back control of my life. And as I sat there, in the glow of my laptop, gathering the last pieces of evidence, I realized I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a strategist, and I was ready to face whatever came next. The day I confronted Emma was one of those muggy Chicago afternoons that felt heavy with expectation. The sky dark with rain that refused to fall. I'd spent weeks preparing for this moment, rehearsing every word, every question, every truth that had been clawing at my insides. I asked her to meet me at a quiet park near our old apartment. It was a place we used to go when we wanted to escape the noise of the city, when we'd sit on the worn wooden benches and plan our future. Now, it felt like the perfect place to watch everything we'd built come undone. She arrived wearing a pale blue dress, her hair pulled back like she always wore it when she wanted to look calm and composed. She smiled at me as she approached, a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. For a second, seeing her standing there, I felt that old ache in my chest, the part of me that still wanted to believe in the woman I'd loved. "Ryan," she said softly, her voice as sweet and false as sugar. "I'm glad you called. I've been meaning to talk to you." I took a deep breath, feeling the folder of evidence in my hands like an anchor. "Emma," I said, my voice steady, "I think you should sit down." She hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty passing over her face. She sat on the bench, smoothing her dress over her knees, trying to control the moment like she always had. But this time, I was in control. I handed her the folder. "I want you to look at these." She flipped it open, her eyes scanning the first few pages, screenshots of the messages, the dates and times, the words that had once belonged to me, now written to someone else. Her face paled, the mask slipping for just a moment. "Ryan," she started, her voice trembling. "Where did you get this?" I didn't let her finish. "You were seeing him before you ended things with me, weren't you?" My voice was calm, but inside I was shaking. "Tell me the truth, Emma." She looked up at me, her eyes wide with something between fear and defiance. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, her voice cracking. "I was scared. You lost your job." Everything felt so uncertain, and Alex, he was there for me. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The raw honesty of her confession hit me harder than any lie. "So while I was trying to pick up the pieces, you were with him?" You didn't even give us a chance?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't let them sway me. I'd spent too long letting her tears excuse everything. "I thought I loved you, Ryan," she said, her voice breaking. "I needed someone who could provide, someone who wasn't falling apart." I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that surprised even me. "You think I was falling apart? You think losing my job meant I wasn't good enough for you? I would have done anything for us, Emma. Anything. But you gave up the second things got hard." She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to hurt you." I stood there for a moment, looking at her, blindly looking at her. The woman I'd thought was my future was nothing but a stranger now. A collection of excuses and betrayals wrapped up in a familiar face. "I don't care what you meant to do," I said quietly. "You hurt me anyway, and I'm done pretending like it doesn't matter." I took a step back, my voice growing stronger. "I'm going to move on. I'm going to rebuild my life, with or without you. But I needed you to know that I see you for who you really are." Emma's tears spilled over, but I didn't wait for her to speak. I turned and walked away, the folder still in her hands. Each step felt like shedding a weight I'd been carrying for too long. The wind picked up, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. As I reached the edge of the park, I stopped and looked back. Emma was sitting there, shoulders shaking, clutching the evidence of her own betrayal. For a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered every sleepless night, every moment of doubt and pain she'd caused me. And I let the pity fade. I walked away with my head held high, my shoulders back, feeling the power in my own resolve. This wasn't just about exposing her lies. It was about reclaiming myself, about proving to her and to me that I was worth more than the hollow promises she'd broken by the time I reached my car. The rain had started to fall in earnest. Washing the city clean, stood there for a moment, feeling the cool drops on my skin, letting them carry away the last traces of the life I'd shared with Emma. I knew there was still a long road ahead. The pain wouldn't disappear overnight. But for the first time, I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. I had faced the truth, and I had survived it. And now, I was ready to build something new on my own terms with nothing but the truth to guide me. In the days after that confrontation, word began to spread. Emma had always been careful to cultivate a perfect image, a loving fiancée, a successful career woman, someone who had it all together. But the truth has a way of seeping out. No matter how carefully you try to bury it, our mutual friends started to notice. I didn't go around telling everyone what had happened, but a few close friends I trusted knew the story. And in a world where people talk, the truth found its own way of getting out. One of Emma's co-workers, someone I'd never met but who knew me by name, reached out to say they were sorry. That they'd seen Emma and Alex together before the wedding was called off, and that they'd always felt uneasy about it. Hearing that confirmation stung, but it also felt like vindication. I wasn't crazy. I hadn't imagined the betrayal. Emma's perfect image began to crack. Friends who'd once gushed about her started to distance themselves, unsure what to make of the woman who had so easily abandoned the man she was supposed to marry. I wasn't out for revenge, but I couldn't deny the small flicker of satisfaction in seeing her face the consequences of her own choices. Meanwhile, started to feel the first threads of peace weaving back into my life. The apartment, once a tomb of memories, felt different now. I donated the things that reminded me of her, boxed up the photos, and slowly reclaimed the space as my own. There were still nights when I'd wake up with her name on my lips, the memory of her betrayal, like a phantom pain. But each time, the weight of it grew a little lighter. I focused on rebuilding. I took every rejection in my job search as fuel to keep going, determined to prove to myself that I was stronger than this heartbreak. I poured my energy into the freelance project I'd started, watched it grow into something I could be proud. Slowly, the fear of being left behind turned into something else. Quiet confidence that maybe, just maybe, I was going to be okay. Emma reached out once. A text message I never answered. It was short. "I'm sorry, I hope you're doing well." But I didn't need her apology anymore. the closure I needed hadn't come from her words. It had come from standing up for myself, from choosing to walk away from her lies. Some nights, the echoes of that betrayal still whispered in the back of my mind, but they no longer defined me. I'd faced the truth, felt the pain, and survived, and that was enough to start over. Enough to remind me that the end of one chapter doesn't mean the end of the story. I was ready for what came next. And 4. The first time in a long time, I felt like the author of my own life again. In the months that followed, my life took on a new shape, one I hadn't expected, but one I was slowly learning to love. The first few weeks were the hardest, every day feeling like I was piecing myself back together from the fragments of who I used to be. But with each sunrise, I found a little more strength. I landed a new job at a creative agency. Fresh start. In a place that didn't know me as Emma's fiancé or the guy who'd been laid off. It was a small team, but the work was challenging and fulfilling. I found that I thrived in the energy of starting over, of building something from scratch without any ghosts to haunt me. The first time I walked into that office, laptop bag slung over my shoulder and a nervous smile on my face, I felt like I was stepping into a new chapter of my life. I didn't have to be the man who'd been betrayed anymore. I could just be me, burdened and unashamed. In my personal life, I focused on rediscovering who I was outside of a relationship. I picked up running again, something I hadn't done since college. The steady rhythm of my feet on the pavement was meditative, a reminder that my body could still carry me forward no matter how heavy my mind felt. I joined a local writers group, sharing short stories and meeting people who saw me for who I was, not who I'd been. Mark stayed by my side through it all, reminding me to laugh, to let go of the bitterness that sometimes still bubbled up in my chest. Told me once over drinks at our favorite dive bar, she did you a favor. You deserve someone who wouldn't leave at the first sign of trouble. I knew he was right. I didn't have all the answers yet. I was still healing, still learning to trust myself again. But every day, the memories of that betrayal felt a little less sharp. A little more like something I'd survived instead of something that defined me. Emma's name became just another word, no longer a wound. Sometimes I'd hear a song that reminded me of her, or see a couple holding hands on the train, and I'd feel a flicker of what used to be. But I didn't dwell on it. I let it pass, like a wave that didn't quite reach the shore. I realized that losing Emma hadn't broken me. It had stripped away the illusions I'd wrapped myself in, forced me to confront who I really was. And in that raw honesty, I found a version of myself I hadn't known existed, someone stronger, more self-reliant, and more willing to embrace the messy, unpredictable nature of life. One Saturday morning, as I stood on my apartment balcony with a cup of coffee in hand, watching the city wake up, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in a long time. The skyline was bright, the streets buzzing with life, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what lay ahead. I'd survived betrayal, heartbreak, and the unraveling of everything I thought I knew. And in that survival, I'd found something better than the safety I'd once clung to. I'd found the courage to start again, to build a life that was entirely my own. The chapter with Emma was over, but my story, it was just beginning. Looking back now, I realized that what I went through wasn't just a heartbreak, it was a reckoning. It was life stripping me down to the bone, forcing me to see what really mattered when the illusions fell away. And though it hurt like hell, it taught me that real strength isn't in holding everything together. It's in learning how to stand tall again when everything falls apart. I learned that love, real love, doesn't vanish when times get tough. It doesn't hide behind excuses or turn cold when you're struggling. It's there in the quiet loyalty, the unwavering support, the belief in you even when you're not sure you believe in yourself. And what I had with Emma, it wasn't that. It was a fragile promise that cracked under the weight of reality. The hardest part was letting go of the future I thought we'd share. But in that letting go, I found something I didn't expect, a new beginning. A chance to rebuild not just my life, but myself. to choose who I wanted to be without anyone else's shadow looming over me. The world didn't stop turning just because my heart was broken. And neither did I. Every setback, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt, all became part of the story I'm still writing. A story that doesn't end with betrayal, but with hope. A story that says, even when you lose what you thought you couldn't live without, you're still here, still standing, still capable of creating something better. If you're listening to this and you felt that same hollow ache in your chest, I hope you remember this. You are stronger than the pain, braver than the fear, and more worthy than anyone who couldn't see your worth. Don't let someone else's betrayal define your story. I'm living proof that even when everything crumbles, you can rise again. And in that rising, you'll discover the kind of strength that can't be taken away, because it's yours. It always has been. And as I step into the future, I do it with open eyes and an open heart, ready to embrace whatever comes next. Because the end of one chapter is never the end of the story. It's just the start of something new.